to The Real Deal, the new JFK show with Jim Fetzer, Gary King, Larry Rivera, Don Fox, and our special guest tonight, Ralph Sinkay. We have a very special topic tonight that's very much in the news. Rafael Cruz and the latest developments on Ted Cruz's withdrawal from the GOP presidential race based on Donald Trump's latest comments on Lee Oswald and Rafael Cruz being together down at in front of the Trade Mart in New Orleans in 1963. And Jim, it's been an incredible 24 hours in the last for the last couple of days. What's your take on all of this?
Larry, it's been unbelievable. Actually, believe it or not, the last hour I just gave a summary of what's been going on politically and laid a background for what we're going to discuss here in greater detail. So I'm having trouble getting in. Why don't you go right ahead and start talking about it, and I'll join in.
Well, we mentioned in our last show about the National Enquirer article that came out in the tabloid, supermarket tabloid, a couple of weeks ago, and we have up on our screen a copy of the cover of the National Enquirer, and this made headlines around the world, Jim, and obviously this touched a very raw nerve in the Ted Cruz camp. Apparently, this happened. This was announced when Donald Trump announced this on exactly yesterday, the day of the Indiana primary, and Ted Cruz admits that he wasn't aware and he wasn't expecting this type of news to come out from the Donald Trump camp, and that it took him by surprise. And we're going to talk about a lot of things, especially what I call the crown jewel. And I'm sure Jim will be able to give us a little bit more information on what the crown jewel means regarding some of the secrets that are kept over in Langley. But it doesn't surprise anybody that this happened out of the blue when Ted Cruz had vowed to fight to the finish, all the way to the end here, and then all of a sudden, this happens, and it's sort of like kind of strange to me, Jim.
Well, I have a conjecture about this, Larry, which is very unflattering to the Cruz family, but I believe that this investigator there in Indiana who lost his life had been publishing about the Cruz family, about the unusual family history, and I would not be surprised if Rafael had a very negative reaction to that, felt it was a threat to his entire, his son's campaign for office, and acted the way he would have acted in the old days by taking him out. I mean, this guy was found dead in a stairway, and there's no way, it wasn't a suicide. Wayne Madsen has written about it. We now have major articles by Stu Webb, a very famous federal whistleblower, by Wayne Madsen, and even by this fellow who winds up dead. And I'm just afraid it's all confirmation that Rafael Cruz was exactly the person we have taken him to be, who was there in Dealey Plaza with Lee, where Chauncey Holt explained that everyone who was there that day was involved in Operation Mongoose.
You mean at the Trade Mart?
At the Trade Mart, yes. At the Trade Mart.
Yeah, that was in the summer of 1963, and Judith Baker has a lot of information about that, and we're going to be discussing that tonight also. And but this intrigues me, Jim, because the background going back to Cuba of the Cruz family is also very intriguing in its own right, and some of this sort of seems to evolve into what we would call political favors later on.
Yes.
In what Ted Cruz became later on, a powerful senator out of Texas, Jim.
I know, a powerful senator. it appears that Raphael was able to tap into the Bush family to get Ted into Princeton as an undergraduate in return for his past performance of services for them. So this whole thing is very, very murky and profoundly disturbing. And I'm very much inclined to believe that he got out because he was worried. He wanted to protect his father and that have more light shed upon this aspect of his history. But where I just say it wouldn't surprise me at all if Raphael had a hand in taking out the student Gary Welsh, Welsh, who had been publishing about the murky family history and dredging up issues that I'm certain not only Ted, but even more so Raphael did not want brought to public attention.
Well, going back a little bit further, Jim, there's a lot of information going around the web and around the internet that Raphael Cruz's recruitment at the University of Texas might have been also some kind of favor or some kind of setting up there, from some kind of agency or something, where later on, he would be developed into some kind of agent or something like that. It's a story that keeps unfolding, I think, on a daily basis, and a lot of people weighing in, a lot of people, uncovering new information and so on and so forth. So I think everybody should stay tuned on this.
Oh, I agree. And we've got to pursue it. And Ralph, of course, has published several blogs that seem to be totally fitting and appropriate. And I know Gary has a lengthy letter from Judith Baker. Maybe he can read a good part of it after we talk about the photograph in question, which, of course, is the very next slide if you're prepared to turn to it, Larry.
Yeah, this is the one that hit the fan, so to speak, when Wayne Manson let's remind our audience and our listeners that we were one of the first organizations here, one of the first groups to bring this out. Last month I was looking at the files, and this happened at the beginning of April, where we even did some analysis on the facial characteristics of the man there holding the leaflets behind Lee Oswald, and where Chauncey Holt is in the same picture, the photograph, and we had already discussed this already. It seems incredible, but this happened a month ago, Jim.
Yeah, cutting edge.
Yeah.
Well, what fascinates me is that in an uncropped version, this has still been cropped on the left. We see the image that appears to be Michael Payne, who was, of course, the husband of Ruth Payne, both of whom were working for the CIA, where Ruth Payne arranged to get Lee Oswald a position in the Texas School Book Depository just 2 weeks before the motorcade, where the shorter fellow on the far right with his arms hanging down is Chauncey Marvin Holt, whom I got to know personally. I sent him this video documentary, JFK, the assassination, the cover-up and beyond, that runs, 3.5 hours. And when I discovered he was alive, because he'd sent a letter to the editor to the Fourth Decade, and he called me up like at 3:30 in the morning saying he'd been staying up all night watching it, and he thought I had it right, which I thought was tremendously flattering, coming from a guy who actually had been a participant in the assassination, where I would meet him personally in California at a restaurant beneath the Rose Bowl, and where, we got to know each other. Very, very fascinating guy. At one point, he was from a trapeze family. He was a painter, a forger, a counterfeiter. At one point, he was Meyer Lansky's accountant, believe it or not. But he was a contract agent for the CIA, who was instructed to prepare 15 sets of Ford Secret Service credentials by his handler, Philip Twombly, when he was working at the Los Angeles Stamp and Stationery Store. He told me how the CIA has all these innocuous sounding proprietaries. That one was interesting, Larry, because it was like 5 floors, and the first 3 were a legitimate business, and the top 2 was where they ran the CIA identification forging operation, where they prepared, for example, the Alec Heidel ID that Oswald had in New Orleans, and where the bottom 3 floors were a legitimate business, guess what? Manufacturing police and sheriff's badges and identification. So if they needed a police or sheriff badge, they could not just get a fake one, they could get a real one for their agent to use. Now, Chauncey was very worried as to whether he was going to get the color code for these pins the Secret Service agents wear that change from assignment to assignment, but he did get them in time. He was instructed to go to Dealey Plaza and to leave these 15 sets of forged IDs in a red pickup truck that would be parked behind the grassy knoll, which is a parking lot used by the Dallas Police Department. But the truck wasn't there. So he wandered around Dealey Plaza, and he told me he saw more bad guys, more assassins, more mercenaries than you'd find at a Soldiers of Fortune convention. He went back, and the truck was there. He left the ID, and in the company of Charles Harrelson, the father of actor Woody Harrelson, who was a hitman for the mob, and a man he knew as Richard Montoya, but who was actually Charles Rogers, they headed to a boxcar down in the railway yard, which would appear to be locked, but would in fact not be. They climbed in and discovered it was full of explosives, weapons, and ammunition. I'm convinced, Larry, that if Lee hadn't worked out as the patsy, those guys were going to be fingered. They, of course, would be arrested and escorted through Dealey Plaza as the so-called 3 tramps. But it was all quite extraordinary, where the very first of the 3 was Charles Rogers, the second was Charles Harrelson, the third Chauncey Holt, where those identifications were not only made by Chauncey, but by Lois Gibson, who was a forensic artist who worked for the Houston Police Department, where she even had the benefit of Chauncey actually coming in for her to examine his features, and she confirmed that the IDs of those 3 tramps were as I've described. We've had whole books published to give false information to the public about their identity, such as by the LaFontaines, this piece of rubbish called Oswald Talk, one of the worst books ever on the assassination of JFK.
Yeah, I just wanted to interject briefly here, Jim, because you mentioned Chauncey Holt, and we have discussed before that he had mentioned that the CIA had a safe house in Acapulco, but now with the new revelations of Rafael Cruz, him going to Calgary, the Great White North, what is known as, Canada, where, who would have thought of going chasing down, some of these Cubans up there in Calgary. I thought that was a brilliant idea, a brilliant move, to get these Cubans that were involved with Oswald down in New Orleans at that time, to get them out of the way and out of the picture. I thought that was a brilliant move, and it sort of falls into place, with what Chauncey Holt has told us, regarding what happened to all those operatives, after the assassination, where they were treated to, a couple of months or even more or even longer, of sun and fun, down in Acapulco after the assassination, So, everything is really, really important, in bringing out, a lot of the operation about, how this.
I believe that safe house, Chauncey told me, was owned by George Ball, who was one of the Warren Commission.
That's right. That's right.
This is how tight it was, the collusion between the assassins and the Warren Commission staff.
Yes. And also, you mentioned Louis Gibson, and I just wanted to briefly mention that.
I'm on the air right now. I'll have to call you back.
Have her evaluating our work on the Man in the Doorway with the overlays, and that promises to be, very. Something that we've been really looking forward to. So, stay tuned on that one also.
Well, of course, as you've reminded everyone, we did already a study about the identity of Rafael Cruz using other photographs. Now we have so many more. Ralph has been instrumental in getting quite a few out on his blog. And I'm sorry to say that he called me just a few minutes ago to say that their internet was down, that I guess electricity's been out for like 3 hours. And he was kind of shocked when I suggested that it might be to make sure he wouldn't come on the show today. I don't think this kind of thought has ever passed his mind. But Chance and I can attest we get knocked off all the time. Chance has had all his files wiped. They took off the whole channel they took down. I mean, the government is not happy with what we do here on The Real Deal.
Well, it goes back to the crown jewel, Jim. I think, you know what I'm talking about, so let's move on to the next slide here.
Sure. I think it's excellent that we have more photographs of Rafael Cruz. And indeed, there are dozens. I have one of Ralph's vlogs here, and it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
And on and on. I mean, this is fantastic. I just want to say what great work Ralph has been doing. And I wanted to recognize that by featuring him on the show here tonight. But it appears that they were going to make sure that didn't happen. Ralph, of course, can be very dogged and determined in ferreting things out. He was the key to identifying the men in the doorway, pointing out to me that it wasn't the face that mattered, but the height, the weight, the build, the clothing, the shirt, the T-shirt, where Doorman and Billy Lovelady are so very, very different, where even Billy himself said he was 2 to 3 inches shorter and 15 to 20 pounds heavier. And, of course, he was there wearing a red and white vertically striped short sleeve shirt. I mean, Larry, can you believe the amount of resistance we've had to the obvious, namely that the doorman was Lee Oswald, who just happened to have the same height, weight, build, shirt, T-shirt as Lee Oswald when he was arrested? I mean, this isn't really rocket science. But when you have 90% of the community that are working the other side of the street, what you get is this defiant resistance to evidence with a disabuse logic and proof. They don't care because they have a mission to defeat the truth.
Well, especially when you have the dean of deception, who we discussed last week thoroughly. We did a show on that with a lot of visuals and a lot of information and a lot of slides, that pointed towards, very dubious.
Larry, it's embarrassing the role of Robert Groden in this community. He and Josiah Thompson have been two of the leaders of the band, the opposition to the truth being advanced and made available to the public. It's just shocking when you look at the history of the JFK research community. It is so infested with vipers and snakes and agents of disinformation.
And they hold the keys to two of the most important, if not the most important issues that we have discussed over the years, which are the alteration of the Zapruder film and The Man in the Doorway, where without any credentials whatsoever, where we have had John Costello, PhD in optics and photography analysis, done his incredible work. We have had Roy Schaefer doing his work, on the removal of frames and the blink rates of the limo, the JFK limo, and the alterations therein, and the work of Douglas Horn. I mean, how can anybody refute the work of these?
I know.
Who conclusively have proven that the Zapruder film has been altered. Yet these two people, insist that the Zapruder film is a quote-unquote time clock of the assassination, which we know it is not.
Josiah Thompson actually said the Zapruder film is the closest thing we have to absolute truth about the death of JFK. I mean, how absurd can you get?
Yeah, and the Man in the Doorway issue, which is something that we have already proven time and again, has been Lee Oswald. And stay tuned, because we have a lot of new people coming on board, with the overlay technology and the analysis, and it's going to be a very exciting time, here, but with before the 22nd of November.
Right.
Be observing the 53rd anniversary, and we can go on to the next slide, which shows.
Well, if we get Gary back, I'd like for him to read that letter from Judith Baker, since it fits here so appropriately in relation to the photograph.
We have it in later slides, Jim. So,
okay. If it's in the slides, go for it, Gary.
Yeah. And
Larry, go ahead.
This is the actual handbill, the actual flyer that was being, which is seen in the hands of not only Lee Oswald, but what we call the trademark man, which we now, even as speculative as it may be, but looks like a lot of people have already determined that this might be Rafael Cruz, and it's very interesting because I received an email recently from Carlos Quiroga of all people, and he was mocking what we were presenting here, saying that he actually had these in his hands because we all know that Carlos Quiroga went to visit Lee Oswald at his apartment and in New Orleans at the time, and if you read Lee and Me, Judy's book, fantastic book, where she describes how Lee believed that this Quiroga guy was actually a pro-Castro agent.
Yeah.
And it's going to be discussed when Gary reads what we have here on that. But just to set this
Chance, if Chance could go back to slide number 2 momentarily, there's a point I'd like to make that I don't believe I made already, which is this. Chauncey Marvin Holt said everyone there that day was working for Operation Mongoose.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So you got a whole bunch of ops there working for the government, and they're all anti-Castro Cubans. And here's Lee Oswald giving out leaflets that are supposed to create the false impression that he's a pro-Castro communist sympathizer, when everyone he's associated with is anti-Castro. And this is what, of course, the agency calls sheep dipping to create the false persona that would be used, in implicating him for the death of JFK.
Exactly. So there's two issues here. Either he was being sheep dipped, or he was there posing as an agent, pro Castro, where all these double agents and everything are and all this spy game is being played out there in New Orleans. But I wanted to point out that something that nobody ever really talks about, the Japanese guy who was in the akimbo pose there, behind Lee Oswald, that's always It's always been a mystery here, Jim. Not very many people have ever, done any serious research on what that guy was doing there or what role he was fulfilling there, and that's still remains a mystery as far as I'm concerned. With this photograph here.
Yeah, we don't have ID on everyone here. I mean, we got Michael Payne, Lee Oswald, Rafael Cruz, Chauncey Marvin Holt. The one guy here, we have a note there, Leroy Young, who is a pilot.
Right.
Then we got this Belcher. What is it?
Belcher. Yeah.
Bud Belcher. So we have a lot of IDs. We don't have the guy with his back to us, do we? Or the one beside?
No. He looks like he's wearing glasses. Yeah, and the other guy over there, it seems like like a spook reunion there.
Really. Well, let's go forward then, since we're going to work our way up to Judith's letter. I guess we're on slide number 5 here, which simply dumbfounded me when Ralph pointed out that Raphael appears to be in this photograph because, Larry, I put this photograph on the cover of Assassination Science.
That's right. It's called the Walter Cisco, SISCO image photograph, and it was one of the best color photographs taken that day of the motorcade. And it shows, like we discussed previously, B.J. Martin and Hargis and Clint Hill and McIntyre.
And as Ralph has pointed out, in the upper right-hand corner there, you see the two fellows with glasses, where the second one, the taller, appears to be Rafael Cruz, and the guy in front of him appears to be Antonio Veciana, who is the founder of Alpha 66, one of the most vicious of all of the anti-Castro organizations.
Yeah, the next slide shows the same photograph circled, with that area circled, so you can go ahead and do that. Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, you got circled Rafael Cruz. But, the other photograph he has of Antonio, I think that indeed that is the younger Antonio Vienza. How was it pronounced, Larry? Viciana?
Viciana.
He is a nasty piece of work. I mean, this Alpha 66 did assassinations, bombings, all kinds of sabotage. Bad group.
Yeah.
I was once doing an interview with a reporter in South Florida, Larry. You're going to enjoy this. And I was talking about how our research had led back to groups like Operation 40 and Alpha 66. And he said, well, these are my people. Because we were broadcasting right into Little Havana. And I said, yes, that's right, And we never got a peep of protest. No one ever called to deny it, to say they'd been maligned or anything else,
Yeah.
There was a reporter right there when I said Alpha 66. He said, these are my people.
Yeah. Well, one thing about the Cuban exile community is that it was quite disjointed at the time. They had multiple different organizations, each tugging towards each other's end, and that I think that's one of the reasons why there was such difficulty where in keeping track of each one of them, because you had the DRE, you had Alpha 66, you had the 25th of July movement or something like that, and all these different organizations were trying to be reined in by the CIA at the time. So it was quite a task there, and then at the same time you had all the Castro agents, who had infiltrated some of these organizations, so those days in the 1960s, before the assassination of JFK, where the anti-Castro movement was trying to get their island paradise back, with the backing of the CIA and the mafia, and then the big business interests, it was quite an incredible point in history there. So that's.
Well, I was dumbfounded I should grab a copy of. Well, I've already shown it, I think, during the first hour of Assassination Science. I got this picture of Rafael Cruz right on the cover.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have used this photograph.
Let me grab it. Just for the sake.
Yeah, this is called the Walter Cisco image. And another observation, if you look at the windshield there, right above Bill Greer, you'll see how nice and transparent it is. But then when you see the Zapruder film, you'll see how obscure it is. Where it seems to have been retouched here in the Zapruder film.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Assassination.
It's the cover. That's right.
Look at that. Can you believe it? Right up here in the corner, we have Rafael Cruz and this Antonio Viciana, who created Alpha 66. I would never have imagined the book. This was published in 1998. Yeah. Who, of course, was Lee Oswald's girlfriend in New Orleans a summer before he came to Dallas, where Ruth Payne arranged for him to have a job at the school book depository, where they would bring the motorcade to the guy they were going to frame as the assassin, but where we proven he was actually in the doorway, and not only could not have been the lone gunman, but can't have even been one of the shooters, where I've identified 6, and there may have been more. I'll read this. Rafael Cruz's parents were still in Cuba. For this reason, just as Carlos Origa was not fully trusted by Bannister's anti-Castro crusaders, neither was Cruz. Lee Oswald was involved in an anti-Castro sting that included passing out flyers about a fake Fair Play for Cuba cell that Lee Oswald organized to trap pro-Castroites in New Orleans. The cell never had a meeting, never existed except on paper. However, any Latino who took a flyer was photographed by Bannister's operatives. Lee distributed these on not 2 but 4 occasions, as described in my book, Me and Lee, which, of course, you can obtain actually on Amazon.com. Unlike my Sandy Hook book, it has not been banned. Cruz was assisting those who were trying to smoke out pro-Castro spies. Several who took these flyers either visited the shown addresses or called for more information. These individuals were confronted and in some cases had drugs planted on them, were beat up and deported back to Cuba. Pretty nasty and very effective. Lee Oswald was a useful patsy because he looked communist, looked pro-Castro. But he was one of ours and was betrayed and set up to cover the foul deeds of LBJ, the CIA, FBI, and rich oil barons and others who created a junta after getting JFK killed with the help of the mafia. How to handle? Cruz was present and held flyers, but he did not hand out any of the flyers. He was there to spy on pro-Castro activities. Now, Larry, in the videos, doesn't it appear that actually Raphael was handing out some of those flyers?
Yeah, and it seems like that. I think Chance has the actual video. It doesn't seem that I think it's only 11 seconds long. That he is actually passing out any, but it seems like he has. The what we will call the stash there, ready to distribute to the ones that are passing out flyers. But regardless, regardless, it's pretty obvious that he's involved in the operation there.
Trump needs to know that the vast majority of Americans understand, thanks to the internet, that Lee Oswald didn't kill JFK. Well, I believe he does not dare say so. Basically, you should understand that Democrats, not Republicans, along with the CIA, Dulles, and LBJ, got JFK killed. Now here, she's talking about the Donald because he brought it up. He was the one who was chastising the media for not following up. And Larry, I thought that was totally appropriate. There have been these big stories broken by the National Enquirer, including that Cruz had as many as 5 mistresses at a minimum, that they didn't follow up on. And now this story about Cruz's father having been in New Orleans with Lee Oswald in front of the trademark, they didn't follow up on that either. I think Trump was perfectly entitled to raise a question. Why not?
Well, also, I've been looking at the reports today, and a lot of focus has been on how Donald Trump has been talking about how Rafael Cruz kept saying publicly that he was praying for something bad to happen to Donald Trump, and
Rafael Cruz was praying for something bad to happen to Donald Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. It played all day today on CNN.
My God, Larry.
Yeah, and where Ralph Blitzer and all the people there at CNN kept insisting that the National Enquirer was not a reliable source, and that unless some of the mainstream media could confirm, and at the time supposedly and apparently this CNN had been trying to confirm this information that had been published by the National Enquirer, and yet none of that information has come out. But Rafael Cruz, as a supposed ordained minister who doesn't even have a place of worship or anything like that, had been praying. I think this would fall into the category of Santeria, Jim. The dark religion out of Cuba, where and the voodoo type of thing.
Well, I wanted something bad to happen to Trump so his son would become the GOP nominee.
Right.
If there would ever be an easy candidate for Hillary to beat, it would be Ted Cruz. I mean, he's ridiculous. He's a caricature. He's such an ideologue. He's a totally implausible candidate. In fact, I can't believe it appears he was only propped up because the Bush family was actually operating to promote his interests in the background.
I was going to mention that. It traces back to the Bush Empire.
Let's go. Yeah, for which Raphael himself worked.
That's right.
Because we know George Herbert Walker Bush was arrested coming out of the Deltex, where he'd supervised a hit team, including an anti-Castro Cuban, Nestor Tony Escadro, who fired 3 shots at JFK, one of which hit him in the back of the head, another of which missed and hit a curbing and injured a distant bystander, James Tague, and a third of which hit a chrome strip over the windshield. And then he was taken downtown and interrogated while his son W was left at loose ends. And we have photographs of W looking lost. And then later he's back in front of the book depository where he's photographed and where I spied him in Jesse Curry's JFK assassination file, a paperback published only by 7-Eleven stores after Jesse Curry resigned as chief of police at Dallas and went to work as their head of security. Let's go to page number 8, slide number 8, Chance, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly interject here that adding to what I was talking about that I saw on CNN today also that when they asked Donald Trump if he believed that that was Rafael Cruz, obviously he would have said, no, I don't believe that. I don't know of anybody, in the right mind who would admit at this point in time in the campaign, to admitting, hey, yeah, that's Rafael Cruz, and I believe that's him. He would never. And the same as when they asked him a few months ago if he believed that Lee Oswald was the lone assassin. He said, yeah, he's the lone assassin. And I think this is all deception. In the campaign where he's faking one way and he's really intending to go the other way.
Well, I think he's a very good bet for giving access to information about 9/11 as well. If there's ever been a presidential candidate who has that capability, it seems to me it's the Donald. I'll continue with Judith. You can quote me. Cruz's father was involved in an anti-Castro sting operation in New Orleans, one of several, which also included Lee Harvey Oswald, who always said he was a patsy and denied killing Kennedy. The media says Cruz was involved with the Kennedy assassination by association with Oswald, but Oswald was falsely accused of killing Kennedy. The media, which is squirming right now because Trump is winning, lies about him, also lies about Oswald, hiding the truth. Roger Stone knows the truth, and the majority of the country has learned the truth on the internet. He doesn't have time, but Trump should know about book and also about mine, Me and Lee. I'm not sure which book she means there. Maybe Ed Haslam's book about Dr. Mary's monkey.
Right.
I never knew Cruz's last name until asked to identify him, which I have done. In short, Cruz's father was involved in an anti-Castro sting operation.
Gary's back.
That's fine. You're back. Yeah. Taking care of the baby. That's a high priority, my friend. Shall I just continue to read this, Gary, or would you like to read part of it?
You're muted.
Gary, I'll just go ahead. Once again, let me stress that if he was working with Lee, as Lee told me he was, that means he was actually anti-Castro and was supporting the infiltration, identification of pro-Castroites and pro-Castro spies. In other words, he was a good guy from the point of view of the American government's official attitude. The odd lie about his actual height is a clue that this indeed was a CIA-sponsored person who was also being protected by participating in what looked like a pro-Castro demonstration. Details as to how this helped Lee are in Me and Lee. Now, he changed an official record of his height to make it look that it was 6 feet when he was actually about the same height as Lee, about 5'9" or 5'10". And it's obvious that the number has been retyped in this document. So that's what she's alluding to. Chance, can we go to slide number 9?
Let me see. She's away.
Gary can go and pick it. This is the last part of Judith's letter, yeah.
Oh, Gary's got the baby. That's wonderful.
Okay.
I've written to a person close to Trump telling him that Cruz, as was Lee Oswald, was involved in an anti-Castro sting operation who unearthed pro-Castro spies in New Orleans. You can read about the operation and events. There were 3 in New Orleans and 1 in Dallas involving Lee Oswald. It was a CIA-sponsored assignment known to the FBI. In my book, Lee and Me, since the media has to keep stubbornly claiming that Lee killed Kennedy, which anyone who studies the matter or who reads Me and Lee or The Devil's Chessboard or one of the anti-LBJ books, they have to imply that Cruz's father was also anti-Kennedy, which is absurd and, of course, exposes the media's lies even more. Well, that's kind of funny. I've done a forensic study of Cruz's facial features. It's him, as the receding hairline, his perfect nose, bone structure of face. Please feel free to ask questions. But clearly, Cruz people, all these anti-Castro people were anti-Kennedy, Larry. I don't know why Judith added that sentence there. Let's go to slide number 10, by the way, because now we're getting into the nitty-gritty about this guy who appears to have been taken out.
Yes, Gary Welsh.
You want to talk about him?
Well, I was only made aware of this today, but it's stunning, and when you consider, the timing of this guy, where he had also been one of the people bringing out the information on Cruz, and then in Indiana on the day.
Right. Well, let me go ahead and read it. Gary Welsh, operator of Advance Indiana Political Blog. Police found Welsh's body laying in a stairway in his apartment complex in Indianapolis. The police report states, quote, police dispatch stated that the caller observed what they believed to be a person shot in the stairway of the building. with a gun still laying on the scene. Person shot was confirmed and victim was pronounced deceased at the scene by medics, end quote. Welsh was a well-known lawyer and political commentator in Indiana who combated against the takeover of the state by religious fundamentalists and opposed well-connected GOP presidential candidates like Jeb Bush, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio. Ironically, there was an Indianapolis connection to Gary Webb's death. The company he was targeting, ACS Incorporated, had as its vice president Stephen Goldsmith, the former mayor of Indianapolis. Indianapolis police may also be interested in Welsh's last email to this editor dated April 11, 2016. Let me just mention this ACS is Affiliated Computer Systems. And if you read up on Affiliated Computer Systems, they're involved in all kinds of covert activities, including thefts of election and the like. So it's I think this may be why they abandoned stealing Indiana for Cruz. There was just too much information here that could get to the heart of the matter about the theft of the election and his having been murdered. Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Not only that, Jim, the main thing is what I said it over a month ago, that the establishment, as powerful as they are, cannot stop a landslide and they cannot stop a phenomenon. And Trump has become a phenomenon. And they did every trick in the book. They were successful with Ron Paul. However, they were not successful with Trump. So we have a bona fide phenomenon, which they're not able to create, nor are they able to control. So yes, they can fix elections, but not a landslide.
Well, I think that's a very nice point, Larry. Gary, let's look at slide number 11.
12. Oh, yeah, 11. That's right, 11. Yes, sorry.
Jet. Great catch on Cruz's ties to Oswald in New Orleans. I always thought the odds were pretty good of the old man having ties to the CIA, if not Cruz's mother as well, since he was immediately able to get a great education at the University of Texas. This is about Raphael. Right after he arrived here and then went to work in the oil industry as a computer programmer. It never made sense to me how he and Eleanor wound up in Calgary and then later returned to the U.S. and he suddenly becomes a Christian minister, although he's never actually had a church he could call his own. Who has been paying Raphael all these years to advocate his dominionist views and now tell evangelical voters that his son was anointed by God as foretold in the Bible? You can't make this stuff up. You know the media is just waiting until if and when Cruz gets a nomination before it unloads on him. Was Eleanor's first husband an intelligence officer as well? And that, I take it, came from Gary Welsh. And let's go to number 12, too, now, Chance, please.
That's stunning, Jim. That passage is just stunning.
The timing of Welsh's death just prior to the Indiana, now this, I think, comes from Wayne Madsen. The timing of Welsh's death just prior to the Indiana GOP primary, one that Cruz hopes to win to keep his chances for the GOP presidential nomination alive, is troubling to say the least. Welsh was a well-known advocate for election integrity, and he supported Donald Trump for the GOP nomination. His death leaves Indiana and its Christian fundamentalist, he calls him fundy, Governor Mike Pence, freer to engage in all sorts of primary election malfeasance and chicanery on May 3rd. The profession of journalism is more bankrupt without the two Garys, Webb and Welsh. That's from Wayne Madsen. Let's look at slide number 13.
Yeah, Donald.
I mean, he's raising a perfectly relevant question. I mean, what was he doing? What was he doing with Lee Harvey Oswald shortly before the death? And, you know, you have people like this guy, Chris Matthews on MSNBC, Larry, who's saying that Trump is nutty for raising the question, that he's discredited himself. But Matthews knows so little about JFK that the ignorance he's revealing is his own. The guy is a mental midget. He knows nothing about JFK.
I don't think he's ignorant, Jim. I think he's just protecting the crown jewel.
So you think he's actually on an assignment here?
Well, you know what the crown jewel is, you know, and that's at the top of the list. You know, some years ago, you know, the CIA released a list of, you know, of the jewels, the protected jewels of the family, and the type and the top top of the list there is something that has always been suppressed, that where we have never been able to see, or that crown jewel, the top of the list jewel is in its revelation, and we all know and we speculate and we assume that it's the JFK assassination.
Yes, absolutely, yes. And here we have a final slide here of Rafael Cruz. From just a day ago.
Yeah, with his Santeria, praying for something to happen to Donald Trump.
This is really embarrassing. We got this little video clip about him handing out these flyers, right? And I think Chance has them. Am I correct? Chance, could you play this little video clip?
Oh, wow. I sent that one.
Well, listen, we know there's a video there. We know the characteristics. We know we got Raphael in New Orleans with Lee Oswald handing out pamphlets. We know Chauncey said they were all working Operation Mongoose. Well, we got the photograph of him with Vesiana on Main Street in Dallas on the 22nd. Now, what's the probability that this guy would be in New Orleans with Lee Oswald and in Dallas with Antonio Vesiana and not be involved in the anti-Castro movement? I say the probability is exactly zero.
Well, it wasn't by chance, Jim. There's a lot of information out there that these Cubans had actually been tracking JFK from city to city. And that day in Dallas, a lot of them were there actually lining the parade with signs, hate signs, showing hate signs throughout the.
And there were a whole lot of CIA officials who were in Dallas paying their last respects at the corner of Main and Houston by the lamppost. Right. There's a whole website devoted to all the familiar faces in Dealey Plaza. In fact, that's a title, Familiar Faces in Dealey Plaza. And it's just stunning how many officials were there, how many operatives, how many assassins were there. Right. This is Chauncey Holt had observed to me.
Yeah, Rip Robertson, David Morales, Lucien Conine, the list is just extensive.
Jerry, I'll let you have a chance to come in and just comment on everything we've been talking about here because you've been distracted by your baby and so forth. Tell us more. Just give us a rundown of your thoughts.
It looks like we've gone mainstream here. The highly possible president of the United States is basically quoting the OIC. So it seems like we stepped into the big leagues in the last couple of days. And it is amazing that the establishment was not able to stop Trump. And we know that there is no support for Hillary. So they're going to have to pull out all the stops. And you know what? They just may not be able to pull it off. However, I hope it doesn't go the same way as JFK.
Well, I spent the first hour explaining why I think that the Donald is going to be able to draw a lot of supporters from Sanders because they overlap enormously on their basic positions, and how he's going to be able to outflank Hillary on the left in relation to foreign policy or support for the endless wars, which both he and Sanders oppose, and on trade policy for the TPP and NAFTA, which Bill introduced and which she has supported until she had to curtail it because she was getting too much criticism from the left. And of course, from the right, he's going to be able to attack her on gun control. I think Hillary's going to be like a ping pong ball here, frankly. I think that the Donald's going to be able to do the job. Yeah. But if you go to the mainstream media, every one of them is saying Trump is going to be a disaster. He's going to cause the GOP to lose the Senate and the House. They're just giving the most uninformed remarks where they've spent no more time studying this issue than Chris Matthews has studying the assassination of JFK.
Yeah. How many times have you heard that the JFK case is an old case, it's 50 years old, what does it matter anymore? Well, this proves beyond any shadow of a doubt just how important and relevant the JFK assassination is to this very day. And there were only two people left, Cruz and Trump, and the JFK assassination was important enough to have one of them step aside. And so now we have Trump as the nominee.
Yeah, it's interesting that you raised that point because I got a couple of emails today from a group that were saying that this was good in part because it was pushing the JFK assassination, onto the mainstream media to the forefront. And however, even though it was negative because they kept saying, alluding to Oswald as the assassin instead of saying the alleged assassin, I kept saying it. There's no such thing as bad publicity. As long as something like this is brought out, to the forefront, and people, especially the younger generation, start to look at this and say, wait a minute, we haven't been taught about this in school. Let's look into it. I think it's still a positive thing, for anybody who is still looking for justice, for Oswald and JFK. And just to finish here, I just wanted to ask Jim if he thought that these new revelations from Rafael Cruz were the exact turning point that made Ted Cruz withdraw from the race today. If that was exactly the reason where they did not want this to be investigated any further, or for that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's why
I absolutely believe that, Larry. That Cruz wanted to protect his father, that his father may have gone too far. It wouldn't surprise me if his father had been involved in the death of this lawyer and blogger, Gary in Indianapolis, who was Gary Welsh, who was calling for investigation, digging out all this dirt about the family, exposing. I think he would have seen it as a threat to his son's ability to become president of the United States and acted in the old way, the old habits. Because in the old days, if there was a thorn in your side, you simply killed it, I mean, this is a crude killing. It was no suicide. They're major investigative journalists on it now. And I think that Cruz was worried that if he stayed in the race, it was going to become a bigger and bigger issue, which is absolutely the case. I mean, we obviously aren't going to drop it, but I'll be very surprised if the mainstream media pursues it any further.
But I'm talking about from a higher level, Jim. Do you think there might have been, instructions from at a higher level?
From the Bush family,
even higher.
It's entirely possible, Larry. Before we conclude, I just want to shout out to Ralphson K for the brilliant work he's been doing with the blog and keeping on top of these issues. I think he's doing wonderful work. We had hoped he could join us, but it looks as though he got his internet cut off. I'm willing to surmise, so he couldn't come on with us, but the thought had never crossed Ralph's mind. He hasn't been through what we've been through here on The Real Deal with Chance, having all his files wiped, having the channel take off of the air, all kinds of interruptions and mischief taking place.
And that's why we persevere today, and that's why JFK is relevant today. All right, so I'd like to thank Dr. James Fetzer, Larry Rivera, Chance George, and our youngest JFK researcher, Claire King. And myself, we'll see you next week for JFK 102.